She handed me her business card across the dinner table with both hands, like she was presenting me with something precious. And my daughter kicked me under the table so hard I nearly spilled my sweet tea. I didn't look down at my leg. I looked at my daughter's face instead. She was smiling. That bright, practiced smile she uses when she's uncomfortable, and her eyes were saying something her mouth couldn't. I slipped the card into my shirt pocket without glancing at it. "Thank you, Nadine," I said. "I'll hold on to this." My daughter's boyfriend. I'd been calling him that in my head, though they'd been together 2 years. Reached across and topped off my glass of iced tea from the pitcher. Smooth move. The kind of thing a man does when he wants you to think he's thoughtful. His name was Nadine's business partner, too, apparently. Or that's what he'd told my daughter. Trent Hollowell. Financial advisor. 43 years old. Wore a watch that cost more than my first car. I'm 67. I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I retired 5 years ago. I garden now. I build birdhouses. I coach Little League on Saturdays. Nobody at that dinner table knew what I used to do for a living, except my daughter, and she'd never told Trent. I'd asked her not to years ago when she first started dating. Old habit. You get careful about what you share when you've spent 3 decades watching people get taken apart by the ones they trusted. I excused myself after the pasta course, said I needed to use the restroom, and stood in my daughter's hallway with my reading glasses on, looking at Nadine Hollowell's business card. On the front, clean serif font, cream cardstock, Hollowell Wealth Strategies, LLC. Phone number with a 704 area code. Email. Website. On the back, in my daughter's handwriting, small, hurried, pressing hard like she was running out of time, were 6 words. Dad. Please. He's going to take everything. I stood there for probably 30 seconds. Then I put the card in my wallet, not my pocket, and walked back to the table. Trent was telling a story about a client he'd helped retire early. Mid-40s, he said. Built up a portfolio worth about $2.4 million through smart diversification and a little nerve. Bought a place on Lake Norman, living the dream. My daughter, her name is Joanna. She's 34. She teaches 4th grade, and she makes the best corn chowder I've ever tasted. Was nodding along. She'd heard this story before. You could tell by the way her nod had a fraction of a second delay, like someone translating from another language. Nadine was asking me about my retirement. What had I done before? Did I have a pension? Was I renting, or did I own the house on Briar Creek Road? Those 3 questions in that order. I've heard that sequence before. It's a soft intake assessment. You ask about work history, then income streams, then assets, and you do it like you're just making conversation. I worked in federal government, I said. Paper pusher, mostly. Pension's decent. And yes, I own the house outright, paid it off about 8 years ago. Trent's eyes moved just slightly, about a 1/4 inch. But I saw it. That's smart, he said. A lot of people your age are sitting on significant equity but don't know how to make it work for them in retirement. People your age. He said it without condescension, which made it worse. The practiced kind of respect that's really just a different shape of condescension. I get by fine, I said. After dinner, while Nadine was helping Joanna with the dishes, and I noticed Nadine had suggested it, volunteered, another small calculative move. Trent and I sat on the back porch with 2 fingers of bourbon apiece. The fireflies were just starting out in the yard. It was a Wednesday evening in late June, and the air smelled like cut grass and approaching rain. He started talking about opportunity. Not immediately. He worked up to it the way you work up to a cold pool, 1 degree at a time, so you don't notice the temperature dropping. We talked about the neighborhood first, then the state of the market generally, then the frustration of CDs and money markets not keeping pace with inflation, then, almost casually, almost like an afterthought, he mentioned an investment vehicle his firm had developed for clients in, as he put it, the asset-rich, income-stable demographic, private real estate fund. Projected returns of 11 to 14% annually. Minimum buy-in of $150,000. Restricted to accredited investors, which gave it the veneer of exclusivity. Only offered to select clients. He hadn't asked me yet if I was interested. He was just describing it, just letting it exist in the air between us like smoke. That's technique. You don't sell in the first conversation. You plant. Sounds interesting, I said. I could send you some materials, he said. No pressure at all. You'd want your own financial advisor to look it over. That last part. That's the move that worries me most when I hear it. You'd want your own advisor to look it over. It sounds like transparency. What it actually does is signal confidence, implies the investment can withstand scrutiny, while also making you feel slightly foolish if you actually do hire someone to scrutinize it, because he already said it was fine. It's a preemptive inoculation against due diligence. I know that move. I've seen it in depositions. I've seen it in handwritten letters from men serving federal time. Sure, I said, send it over. I drove home that night doing exactly the speed limit and thinking about my daughter's handwriting on the back of that card. He's going to take everything. She hadn't written, I think. She hadn't written, I'm worried. She wrote it like a statement of fact, which meant she already knew something. I called her the next morning at 7, before she left for school. I got your note, I said. A pause. Then she said, he doesn't know I wrote it. He doesn't know you saw it. Good. Keep it that way. Tell me what happened. She talked for 20 minutes without stopping, the way she used to talk when she was 16 and something had gone wrong, and she'd been holding it in for days. She'd found a folder on his laptop 3 weeks earlier. She'd been looking for their shared grocery list, she said. The kind of small domestic errand that means you're genuinely building a life with someone. The folder was labeled with a series of numbers. Inside were spreadsheets, names, account balances, dates of contact, projected extraction timelines. Her name was in the spreadsheet. Column D, projected yield, $340,000. That was her inheritance from her mother's life insurance policy. Trent had known about it since month 4 of their relationship. She found the date he'd written it down. Does he know you found it? I asked. No. I put everything back exactly how it was. Smart girl. She gets that from her mother. Have you moved the money? I was afraid to. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to tip him off. Don't move it yet. Don't change anything. Act like everything is normal. Can you do that? Another pause. Yes. Good. I'm going to handle this. But Joanna, I need you to trust me and let me work. Don't confront him. Don't give him any reason to accelerate. Can you give me 2 weeks? What are you going to do? I'm going to find out exactly who he is, I said. And then I'm going to make sure he never does this to anyone again. I want to explain something before I go further. When I retired, I didn't stop knowing people. 31 years in federal financial crimes means you have a long list of contacts. Forensic CPAs, securities attorneys, state AG investigators, former colleagues who went into private practice. You don't retire from that world so much as you step back from it. The door stays unlocked. I called a former colleague named Phil. We'd worked the same wire fraud task force out of Atlanta in the mid-2000s, and I told him what I had. He ran Trent Hollowell through everything available at the federal level. Then I called a securities attorney I knew in Raleigh. Here's what we found. Trent Hollowell had a Series 65 license that lapsed in 2019 and was never renewed. Hollowell Wealth Strategies, LLC, was registered in Delaware but had no active registration with the North Carolina Secretary of State as a registered investment advisor. The website was 18 months old. The phone number on the business card routed to a VoIP service registered to an address in Nevada that didn't exist. His real name was not Trent Hollowell. His real name, which I'm not going to use here because the case is still partially ongoing, was a man who'd been the subject of a civil fraud complaint in Tennessee in 2017. He'd settled out of court for $60,000 and moved on. In Ohio in 2020, he'd operated under a different name, running what the state securities board characterized as a real property investment scheme targeting retirees and widows in the Columbus metro area. He collected roughly $890,000 before the operation collapsed. He was gone before charges could be brought. He was good at disappearing. He was better at reappearing. My daughter's spreadsheet column, projected yield, $340,000, wasn't an estimate. It was his target. He'd run the same calculation on 11 other people. I found 8 of them through Phil's contacts. Most were women, mostly between 55 and 75. Most had lost someone, a spouse, a parent, and inherited assets they weren't sure how to manage. He chose lonely people, or people who were almost lonely, people with money and a gap where certainty used to be. My daughter wasn't lonely, but she was trusting, and she'd loved him. That was the part I had to hold carefully, that I couldn't let harden into something that would hurt her later. I called Trent on a Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the dinner. "Trent," I said, "I've been thinking about what you mentioned on the porch. That real estate fund. I'd like to hear more." His voice shifted into a warmer register in less than a second. "Absolutely, sir. I'm really glad you reached out. When would work for you?" We met the following Tuesday at a coffee shop in Concord. Neutral ground, his suggestion. He had a leather portfolio with him, embossed with the Hollowell Strategies logo. Inside were glossy pages, graphs with clean upward curves, a letter on what appeared to be law firm, letterhead certifying the fund's structure. Projected returns illustrated in a way specifically designed to make $150,000 feel like the smallest possible barrier to a very large future. I asked good questions. Not smart questions. Good questions. The kind a cautious but persuadable retired federal employee might ask. I let him work. I let him build confidence. At the end, I told him I was interested but wanted to consult with my accountant first. "Completely understandable," he said. "Take all the time you need." He didn't push. He never pushed in the first conversation. He was patient the way water is patient. It doesn't argue with the shore. It just keeps coming back. I had a small digital recorder in my shirt pocket. I'd had it running since I sat down. In North Carolina, one-party consent applies to recorded conversations. Everything he said was legal for me to have. I went home and typed up a summary of the meeting while it was fresh. Then I sent the recording, my notes, and the materials he'd given me to Phil, to the securities attorney in Raleigh, and to a contact at the North Carolina Secretary of State's Securities Division. Then I waited. 10 days later, I called Trent again. "I've talked to my accountant," I said. "I'm ready to move forward. I want to put in $200,000. He was quiet for exactly one beat. The kind of pause a man takes when the number is bigger than expected, and he's recalibrating. "Then, that's wonderful. I'll draw up the subscription agreement." We met again, same coffee shop, 4 days later. He had a subscription agreement in the portfolio. Several pages formatted to look official. Signature lines at the bottom. He explained each page in plain language, which is another technique. If you can explain it simply, it seems trustworthy. I read every page slowly. I asked 2 more questions. I picked up the pen. And then I set it back down. "Trent," I said, "before I sign this, I need to ask you something." "Of course," he said. "How long have you been going by that name?" The temperature in the room changed. I've seen that before, too. The moment when someone realizes the floor isn't where they thought it was. He said nothing for about 3 seconds. "I'm sorry. Your Series 65 license lapsed in 2019, I said. Hollowell Strategies has no active registration in North Carolina. The address on your Nevada registration is a parking garage, and the man I'm looking at right now settled a fraud complaint in Tennessee for $60,000 using a different name 7 years ago." He closed the portfolio. "I think there's been some confusion," he said, and his voice was very calm and very flat. The way voices get when the performance is over, and what's left is just the calculation. "There hasn't been," I said. "I spent 31 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I know what you are. I know what you did in Ohio. And I know my daughter's name is in a spreadsheet on your laptop, with a number next to it." He stood up. He picked up the portfolio. "Sit down," I said. "The investigators from the Secretary of State's Securities Division are outside. They've been waiting since before you arrived. If you walk out that door, you're going to walk into them anyway, and the only thing leaving now will accomplish is making the next several hours much more unpleasant for you than they need to be. He sat down. And he put the portfolio on the table, and for about 30 seconds he just looked at it. And then, because I've seen this moment too many times to be surprised by it anymore, he made one last calculation and asked if there was any way to make this easier on himself. Cooperate fully, I said. Tell them everything, especially the names of anyone who helped you structure the Ohio operation. He nodded, almost to himself. The two investigators came in 3 minutes later. I shook their hands, gave them the folder I prepared, recording notes, materials, my written summary, and I left. I drove to Joanna's school. I waited in the parking lot until the final bell rang and the buses cleared out and the parents' pickup line thinned to nothing. When she came out the side door with her canvas bag over one shoulder and her keys in her hand, she saw my truck and she stopped walking. I got out. She covered the last 20 feet at a jog, and I held her for a long time in the school parking lot in the afternoon heat. Is it done? She asked into my shoulder. It's done, I said. How? I'll tell you everything, but not here. Come over tonight. I'll make the chili. She pulled back and looked at my face, and whatever she saw there made her laugh a little. The way you laugh when the relief is still shaking loose. You knew what you were doing the whole time. I had a pretty good idea. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed you to act normal. And you can't act normal when you know the plan. Nobody can. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. A kid on a bicycle swerved around us without slowing down, and she watched him go and then looked back at me. Trent was, I really thought I know you did, I said. That's not a failure on your part. That's what he's designed to make people think. She nodded. She needed a minute. I gave it to her. Dad, she said finally, you told me you were a paper pusher. I pushed a lot of paper, I said. Most of it was evidence. She shook her head slowly, almost laughing again. 31 years and you never told me. Your mother thought it was better if you grew up not worrying, I said. She was right. You grew up trusting people. That's a good thing, even when someone abuses it. We stood there a little longer. Down the street, a lawnmower started up. The smell of cut grass again. Same as that night on the porch when Trent had sat across from me, patient as water, and built a beautiful lie out of glossy paper and borrowed vocabulary. What happens to him now? She asked. The Securities Division will refer to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Given the Ohio case and what he was doing here, Phil thinks we're looking at federal wire fraud, securities fraud, possibly RICO if they can tie in the associates from Ohio. He's going to have a hard several years. And the other people? The ones in his spreadsheet? They'll be notified. Some of them may have already transferred funds. Those cases are more complicated, but investigators have his records now. I paused. It's not nothing. It matters. She asked about the money she'd inherited from her mother. I told her to move it first thing in the morning into a different institution and to call me with the new account information. I'll look it over, I said. Make sure everything's set up right. You can do that. I know a few things about what to look for. She drove away first. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before I started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the empty flagpole in front of the school, rope tapping against the metal in the summer breeze. A couple of teachers were crossing the parking lot, talking about something that made one of them laugh. Ordinary afternoon. The world going about its business. I thought about the other 8 names Phil had found. The ones who'd already trusted Trent Hollowell, or whoever he was, or whoever he would have been next. I thought about the spreadsheet, projected yield, the clinical distance of that language, the way it turned people into line items. I've spent my career watching the machinery of financial fraud operate from the inside, and the thing that never stops landing on me, even after 3 decades, is how ordinary the mechanics are. It's not elaborate genius. It's patience and selection, and the specific exploitation of the specific thing people are most afraid of, that the money they've worked a lifetime for, or inherited from someone they loved, or saved against some imagined future disaster will somehow disappear before they're ready to be without it. It's fear. That's all it ever is. Dressed up in glossy folders and law firm letterhead and a watch that costs more than a used car, my daughter is going to be fine. She's already fine. She's the kind of person who trusts people, and she's going to stay that way, because I'm not going to let what Trent did turn her into someone who doesn't. She called me that night from her car, on the way to my house for chili. "Dad," she said, "I have to ask you something." "Go ahead." "When you were sitting across from him at that coffee shop and you said all of that, how did you know he wouldn't just run?" I thought about it for a second. "Because men like that don't run," I said. "They negotiate. Running is an admission. Negotiating still feels like control." I knew he'd sit there and try to work the situation. A quiet moment on the line. Whined through her open car window. "That's terrifying," she said. "It's just pattern recognition," I said. "Come over. I made cornbread too." She was quiet another second, and then, "Dad, I'm really glad you're my dad." I didn't say anything clever. I didn't have anything clever to say. "I know," I said. "Drive safe." The charges were filed 11 weeks later. Trent, whose legal name turned out to be a third name I still won't repeat here, was indicted on 6 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of securities fraud, and 1 count of identity fraud. His cooperation with investigators did, in fact, work somewhat in his favor, as it usually does, but the U.S. Attorney's Office confirmed that 4 of the 8 prior victims were able to recover partial restitution, and the Ohio scheme, which had gone unprosecuted, was now being incorporated into the federal case. The Securities Division sent me a letter. Formal language, careful phrasing, thanked me for the quality of the documentation. I framed it. Put it up in the garage next to a photo of Joanna at her college graduation, and another one of the 2 of us fishing on the Uwharrie River the summer she turned 12. She's holding a bass up with both hands and squinting against the sun and laughing at something I said that I don't remember anymore. She came by on a Saturday in October to drop off some soup she'd made. She saw the letter on the wall and stood in front of it for a moment without saying anything. "I thought you built birdhouses out here," she said finally. "I do," I said. "I build other things too." She turned around and looked at me, and the afternoon light was coming through the garage door behind her, and she had that look she gets sometimes. The one that's half exasperation and half something else. Something she doesn't say out loud. Then she held up the soup container. "Split pea," she said. "Your favorite." I took it from her. "Come in," I said. "I just put the kettle on."